Welcome to the Mind Your Own podcast with Aaron Sorensen and Sausha Durkin, where we stick to sports, except when we're not.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Own podcast. I'm Erin.
I'm Sausha.
And here's hoping this week my internet is kinder to us. But
I made myself go in a different studio and not my office because Wi-Fi is whatever. So I hardwired myself and hopefully that helps. Okay, Siri.
Sorry, that wasn't even Siri. That was me just opening TikTok and forgetting that I had the volume on. So everyone just ignore everything that just happened. Basically, I wasn't ignoring you. I was doing the thing where you're going to close out of all your apps because I was I should shut down my phone. No, I just opened TikTok in the process of it. So it's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, Sasha and I were both talking and this is just kind of the nature of, it's not even full fall, but it's pre-fall. It is just very busy right now. And, I am feeling it. I've been I hate doing this, by the way. I hate doing this, but it's where I'm at right now is I've been counting the days down. So since last Thursday, I am on every day I have been in Lincoln, and it ends on Wednesday. So the day after we record this is the last day. And that's not last day I have to go to Lincoln. It's just the last consecutive in a row that I have to go. And, nothing that I'm going for is bad. I like what I'm doing. It's just the process of getting there and driving and all of the events and everything else going on. It's just, I am tired.
Yeah, me too. There's just a lot going on, in general. And then for me this week, I've got Pinnacle Bank Championship this weekend and all of that and all that entails. And so I'm just trying to get everything done before then. So yeah.
As we're sitting here, I'm just remembering that I had 2 more meetings that came up on my calendar in the last couple of hours that I'm going to write down before I inevitably forget and don't show up for them. So yes, it's been busy. I have just again, it's nothing that I'm it's nothing bad. It's just a lot going on. And, we're back into after Hale Varsity's yearbook, which by the way, this is where my brain is at. I even thought about this and then also forgot. So part of the thing that I'm getting busy for is I'm getting ready to leave for 10 days to go to Ireland. Now, part of that is my own doing. Part of that is on me. I have made the choice to go to Ireland early, which is I'm not complaining at all, but there's just a lot of things. Yeah. I do want to just point out, going to Ireland for Hale Varsity is being made possible by Union Bank and Trust. And it's important to note that, I'm sure you will hear reads and different things throughout different Hale Varsity podcasts, everything else. But I did just also want to throw that out there that that my ability to go to Ireland has been made possible because of Union Bank and Trust. And we're very thankful for that. So I just want to point that out before I lost my train of thought, because that is where I'm at today is if I don't write things down right now, which is what I am doing before I forget, I will just I just will not remember.
Yep. Same.
And in fact, I now need to write down that we need to look into our email inbox, because if you have emailed us, it's not working. It just has it vanished from the earth. In fact, our inbox knew I was so stressed about opening it, and we were going to do an episode where I was let's just read our emails. No, it just doesn't exist anymore apparently, but you can still email it. We'll get re-access to it. If you hacked it, can you give us access back? I just think, I think Outlook is being goofy today is really what I think. And that's fine. It's what day isn't goofy without an Outlook, Microsoft, whatever.
Yeah, some kind of outage, or it doesn't work correctly or whatever. Yeah, that's super I don't even want to get into that because I could probably just spend an entire episode talking about that.
Which is what everyone is here for.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our Microsoft Office griefs. Let's just go at it. Seriously, though. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so you have Pinnacle Bank. How else? What else is going on in your life?
Just everything and anything possible. It's it's not even a rain when it rains it pours type of situation. It's just it's that time of year where everybody's ramping up to get ready for football, volleyball, practices are happening, and then you've got press conferences, and then you have to think about a bunch of other stuff and how you want to approach it. So it's just like legitimately everything is happening at the same time this week. So it's just one of those weeks.
It really is. And in fact, as we're sitting here, I just remembered that a meeting that I have written down got canceled for tomorrow. So I should also cross that off so that I don't show up for it, because I will. You're all just experiencing me doing my like busy work right now on this podcast. It's fine. No, I like this day, the day that we are recording this, just to be clear, like I've already been to Lincoln and back.
Mhm.
So when I was saying that every day is like Lincoln Day, Nebraska volleyball kicked off practice. We are recording on a Tuesday. They can start practicing 17 days prior to their first game. So that is what they are doing today. So went down for that, which is great. Got an opportunity to talk to John Cook, which if you are not a Hail Varsity subscriber, you should be, because our August issue has become the volleyball issue in years. Over the years, it just kind of has naturally become that. It's kind of like our pseudo like volleyball yearbook, if you will. Talked to John Cook for something for that. Also have finished my feature for that as well. So exciting stuff.
Right.
But yeah, it's been a busy day. But then I remember, like, as I'm sitting here, like, oh my gosh, my life is so busy. They practiced from 9 to 11, and that 9 to 11 actually went longer than 11, and they will be back from 3 to 6. So they're in like two days. They're in the heart of like getting themselves ready for the season. So I really can't and should not complain. Or I can, but I should also recognize their plight as well.
That's what I was thinking about as you were saying that. I bet they're on 2-a-days right now. I only was thinking about that because my stepson is also doing 2-a-days, and it's like throwing that in there, and then Mario having to go to the vet and all of that. It's like, yeah, trying to keep. It's nothing bad. He just like it's shot time, you know.
Yeah, actually, we need to do that with Scout as well, and I keep forgetting.
This podcast is going to be called the Reminder episode.
The reminder. If you have anything that you've been putting off, make a to-do list and like go get those things checked off. And in fact, like I just want to point out, this is really helpful for me because I often will not feel accomplished at the end of the day. If you have something like just emailing somebody back, like all it is just like I need a reply to an email, or it could be like I don't know, just like things that you know that you're going to do. So like, I know I need to purchase adapters for Ireland. That is a super easy thing to do. I put it on my to-do list because even though like, I know it's not going to be something that I really necessarily need to be reminded of, there's something about checking it off that makes me feel better. So build in, when you make a to-do list, build in like easily checkable things, because there's like psychology to that.
Yes. I think it's super important, just like, you know, not to plug Meathead Test Kitchen again, but that we talk about that all the time, just because every single win is a win, like big or small. And sometimes, some days, just getting the to-do list done is the win. Like,
yeah, even if it's like something super, super small, just like
throwing something in the mail or something, you know?
Yeah. Even if it's like, just like, I don't know, like, again, like those are just those little things that you can check off. But I am glad that you brought up Meathead Test Kitchen, because you did bring up, we were talking separately, and I will be honest, I was like, kind of like my mental headspace, like it took me a second to read what you wrote and like understand what you're saying. And then the second you did, I was like, oh no, that makes sense. I did, before we like inevitably forget everything we were planning, like, do you want to share with everyone what you said to me? Because this was a conversation that you and Sadie, who is your Meathead Test Kitchen co-host, were having late last week.
So we had just recorded an episode. We had a guest, so we had to do it on Saturday. Normally we record earlier in the week, but we were just kind of chatting afterwards. And I was sharing with her a conversation that had happened the night previous between a couple of people that were at my house. They happened to be 2 men. But the way in which that they were listening to each other, when they normally would be arguing about what the other person was saying, because they were just listening to a different perspective and like actually taking it in and being like, oh, okay. And like actually understanding and grasping, like if I had that same conversation about what they were having, like talking about, it probably wouldn't have been met with the same ears. And that's what we're always talking about on this podcast. And I was like, dude, maybe that's what Erin and I should talk about next week. And I'm glad that I remembered to bring it up today, just because the flip side of that too, and what Sadie was saying was, well, think about this. Like if a man comes up to me and tries to explain something to me, or is trying to convince me of something, I'm probably not going to listen to them with the same ears either. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good point, because it's not always men need to talk to other men. Sometimes women need to share with other women, like experiences and things like that.
Well, I mean, yes, because the thing that we have come to find, so actually, like, this is a really good point, because like we often challenge, yes, for the many men that listen to this podcast, we challenge you, talk to your friends, talk to your family members, talk to the men in your life that are going to hear you, respect you by hearing your voice. But the one thing that like I especially hear, and like this is something that like I have to even kind of check myself on, is how many times this conversation comes up a lot on TikTok, is Black women who are saying, we have been trying to tell you things for a long time and you're not hearing it. And so women, especially white women, need to do a better job of listening, and also do a better job of like hearing the realities that other people are facing, because it can get really easy to honestly benefit, which is kind of wild, but it can be, it can be beneficial, depending on your, where you are, like your privilege level, to benefit from things without even realizing that you might be benefiting from misogyny, or you might be benefiting from racism. Like it's so complicated, because like I think sometimes, again, we've talked about this on this podcast before, people, when they hear this, these are words that like trigger things with people, and you say like the word racism, or you say misogyny, or you say this, and people are like, I'm not sexist, I'm not this, and like oftentimes it's like, I don't think anyone is actually implying that you are. It's just it's a systemic thing. It's just the world that we were raised in, the thing, like the way, what we grew up around, where we don't even sometimes realize the things that we feel, think, our reactions. And so as women, we also need to be willing and able to talk to others and say, hey, hold on a second, I need to share with you and have a conversation. Because I think it's, it's really easy to kind of just go, well, men talk to each other, but like, we also need to be talking to one another, and we also need to do a lot of listening, especially like as the world, has things happen that are not great. You hear people who are like, hey, I've been saying this to you for a while. And you're like, well, I didn't hear you say that. And it's like, that's not on them. They were saying it. You just weren't listening.
Yep. Or you weren't hearing it.
And
that's, when we're talking about, when we bring up, active listening and those kinds of things, that's what we're talking about, is like, you could be sitting having a conversation with somebody, chatting, and it could be a serious topic or it could be not. But if you are waiting and anticipating the next thing that you are going to say, either as a rebuttal or to prove someone wrong, that's not listening. That's just waiting to speak. And that's different.
Yeah. Also, side note for everyone who just watched, my watch just told me good job. Like, you're almost there on my standing. I am currently very firmly sitting on my butt right now, but all right, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that too, where it's like you get, and I think there's I do want to point out too, I think sometimes there's a difference that like when you're excited and you're like excited to speak, like don't feel bad about that if you're like, I'm so excited to chime in because like I have something that I'm really excited to contribute. Like it's more or less like when you're not even willingly hearing what the other person is saying, and then you're just like ready to like chime in with whatever is next. And actually it's interesting that you brought all this up, because I actually think this is really related to what else that I thought we could talk a little bit about today, and that is Brittney Griner. And the one thing that I've really not enjoyed through this whole process is the overall lack of critical discussion around this, because when I had tweeted recently, I bring her home after the sentencing, or after the verdict came out for her. I had people who met me with like, one person who was like, oh, so are you saying that every single person who's in jail right now on these type of drug charges should be released? And it's like, yeah, actually I am. But here's the thing is, like, I was watching some of the reactions and some of the comments back to me, and I realized I'm like, these are not people who are looking to have a conversation with me. These are not people who are looking to hear me. They're not looking to understand this. This whole thing has become so politicized, and opinions are like, well, if you didn't like it, you shouldn't have gone there. If you didn't like it, you shouldn't have this. But like, people are just not willing to have a conversation. And it like, that's what gets really hard, because even when we talk about like, hey, talk to people and like sincerely listen, it does get hard when you're like, there's no conversation to be had here. Like the other end of this is not interested in having a conversation. So like, it's almost easier to just mute, block, and move on. But then they kind of have this like audacity to be like, well, you're just ignoring it. You don't want to address it. And it's like, no, I just don't really want to talk to a brick wall today.
Mm-hmm. It gets really, those conversations or lack thereof are super frustrating, because even if like you tiptoed your waters into that direction, or tiptoed your toes into those waters. That's what I was trying to say. Sometimes it's like, sometimes they're your family members. And that can be pretty, I don't want to say toxic, but uncomfortable. It can be pretty uncomfortable, because somebody will bring something up, but if you're not, it's almost like if you're not willing to have a battle with them or an argument with them about it, they like somehow you are like proving the point. And it's like, well, when I have tried to have this conversation with you, you're not interested in an actual conversation. You just want to kind of like yell into the void at somebody.
Yeah. And so here's the thing for like, if you're somebody who is like currently, like, for instance, like myself, I will say I have to give a lot of credit to, when we're talking about Brittney Griner's case specifically, I have to give a lot of credit to The Athletic for how it has handled the coverage of this. So for instance, I pulled up a Q&A. This is with a United States hostage policy expert. The Athletic spoke with Dr. Danny Gilbert, a Rosenwald Fellow in the U.S. Foreign Policy and International Security at the John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding at Dartmouth College. Long title, very prestigious individual. But I just want to point out, like, The Athletic has done a great job of coverage on this, because it's not just talking to other athletes, like in the WNBA. It's not just about doing different profiles on Brittney and the coverage of this case in general. But like, so for anyone, like, I'm assuming most everyone listening knows, but if not, Brittney Griner was found guilty for drug smuggling and possession charges in Russia, and has been sentenced to 9 years in prison. But when I was reading this Q&A that The Athletic did with Dr. Gilbert, I do want to just read first and foremost this very first Q&A piece of it, this first question and answer piece of it. So the author, who is Richard Deitch, asks, was there anything surprising about how the guilty plea played out for this? And this is what Dr. Gilbert said. We expected the Russian court to find her guilty and to give her a very long sentence. She was found with 0.7 grams of hash oil, and yet they charged her with international drug smuggling. Clearly not something that she was actually doing. It's really a political process, not a criminal one. There was a couple of slightly surprising moments to me during the court case itself, which is that she had members from her Russian team testifying on her behalf. They were extremely brave to come out and to speak on her behalf and to, in essence, go against the Russian government and saying what they had to say about her character, about her devotion to her team, her teammates, to the Russian public, and being a sports star over there. But as we can see, that's not something that the judge really took into consideration. That judge most certainly has Vladimir Putin breathing down their neck to make sure that Brittney Griner got the guilty verdict in this incredibly long 9-year sentence. And since then, we've seen and this is now me for those who aren't watching this, this is my perspective on this, is we are now also seeing similar situations where people who had similar amounts or more of a certain type of drug in their possession given less time, or given kind of the grace to be, well, you made a mistake or whatever. But there's a lot to say when you look at Brittney and you realize this is a Black woman, a queer Black woman living in Russia, who is a lightning rod on the political spectrum for them, where especially now more than ever, as Russia, right after the invasion of Ukraine, and just the way that it was presenting information to its own people, and how you can't speak up, you can't have a difference. Like, we talk a lot about like difference of opinion, but this is a country that truly does not have the allowance for difference of opinion. Right. And so I think what's super frustrating is like when I read that and then I see some of the responses where I can tell the person on the other end is not interested in a conversation, is like, I wish I could send them this, be like, listen to this really smart person talk about why this happened and what is actually the situation here. But the reality is if somebody has decided that the side that they're on is that she made a mistake, which I don't think she would tell you that she didn't, but at the same time, it was like, if you're also taking into consideration that like it, regardless of your feelings on drugs or, hash oil or whatever else, like it was such small amount. And for that type of sentence, you kind of, no matter what, like you kind of have to be able to think a little bit beyond that and go, well, that seems really strange.
Right.
But like, I think, and I wish I remember who tweeted it, but it was a really like profound thing that I saw where they said something along the lines of like, I know who it was. And now that I remembered, I'm going to go find it. It was Mina Kimes. Mina Kimes was tweeting about this after the verdict came out. And let me go find the tweet itself, because I do want to give her credit for her words, because it did hit me really, really clearly. Let's see. She's like me. She probably tweets a lot, and then it's going to be hard. Okay, so not too much, but like, here we go. Okay, let's see. Okay, so she quote tweeted the ruling, the findings, and she said, "This is awful, as are many of the replies. People's brains are so poisoned by the politicization of this story that they have lost sight of the fact that this is a human being whose future is in peril. Heartbreaking all around." And I think that's what's so hard for me is like when we talk about like having conversations with each other, I think a lot of it is because we hope that one-on-one or that conversation comes from a place of like you recognizing this person as a human being, having a conversation with you. But as I've watched this also play out, it's also alarming to kind of discover how many people really don't care.
Right.
It does not matter to them that you are on the other end of this conversation. Like they don't care that you're human.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to them. And they don't care that Brittney Griner is human. And I've seen like people sharing like Facebook posts about like trying to compare like Vietnam War like veterans to like what is going on and how she should be more appreciative. And it's like, I don't know how we got here, because these things are not, they're not the same. And why are we trying to disrespect one person?
It gets really frustrating and I feel like convoluted is a good word for it. Just because, as we know, it's so much easier to spread misinformation than it is to spread factual information. And I think a lot of times what happens anymore, just literally living in America, is that everything is politicized. And you'll have politicians that'll weigh in on it. And then folks that are watching, whatever you're watching, it's all skewed one way or the other. I mean, it can be more skewed than another place, but if you're, and I think what ultimately ends up happening is then automatically as human beings, we feel like we have to pick a side. And in situations like this, you don't have to pick a side. You just have to be compassionate for another human being. Like, think about like if this was not Brittney Griner, it was your, I don't know, your uncle or some family member or somebody who was close to you, who was in the same predicament in a very precarious situation in a country that has started a war with another country for whatever their reasoning may be. And now this individual is stuck in between all of that, and is their status as an athlete, the status of her background being LGBTQ plus IA, and then also happening to be an WNBA player. And on top of that, also being a woman of color. Like all of those things in America, if you think about every single individual aspect of that, is a politicized thing in America. And do you think Russia doesn't know that?
Oh yeah. And I mean, like, and this is the part for like me,
critical
like,
thinking.
Like I think back to, oh gosh, I'm just dropping all kinds of like trigger topics into this episode. But like I think about like, for instance, when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling and people were very upset. And as it turns out, his whole choice to kneel came from a United States military member having a conversation with Colin Kaepernick about how, hey, you sitting on the bench is actually a pretty disrespectful thing to do. And so had a conversation about like what would be a respectful thing. And Colin Kaepernick ultimately learned that when you are unable to stand, or if something, there's kneeling is an appropriate thing to do within the United States military. And so that is why he made that choice, was based on that conversation he had with this other individual. People don't care. It doesn't matter. They've determined that it is disrespecting the flag. They don't care about, the reasoning. They don't care about how he got to his point. It does not matter. So this is why I brought that up, is because Trevor Reed, who is a United States Marine Corps veteran who was also wrongly detained in Russia for 3 years before being released this past April in a prisoner swap, has been pressing the United States government to bring Brittney Griner home. He was talking about this at a rally in Houston recently.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, here is an individual who was speaking at Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee in Griner's hometown of Houston. He detailed the inhospitable conditions. I'm reading from Sports Illustrated, by the way. He spoke about the inhospitable conditions of the Russian prison in which he was detained for 985 days. He said, every day that you're in prison there, it's like you're waking up to a nightmare. He also spoke out on behalf of Paul Whelan, another American detained in Russia, but said the challenges that Griner faces are greater due to her race and sexual orientation, as the country systemically discriminates against people who are Black or LGBTQ plus IA plus. I think I switched all. Sorry.
I did that too. My apologies.
There is no justice in Russia, he said, which was this was then shared with CNN. Brittney and Paul will not receive justice in Russia. They're not going to receive a fair trial. They will not receive a fair investigation. They will not be there as hostages. They will be there as hostages, until the United States gets them out. So this is an individual where I wish I could then go share this with people and be like, listen to him. This is a United States military veteran who has been in the situation that these two individuals, both Brittney and Paul, are in now, but he even recognizes how much harsher this is going to be for Brittney because of who she is. And that's not to say he is, and by the way, not in anywhere implying in this that he did not matter, that Paul, the other individual being detained, that he does not matter. That is not what he is saying. He is just acknowledging the fact that she is up against a more difficult road because of who she is. And I think, when we ask people to just have conversations with each other, I think what we're asking more than anything is to see people and to hear them. And it's so frustrating. I know if you are somebody who's I'm trying to have those conversations and the person on the other end isn't willing to listen to you. And in those cases, sometimes you have to cut your losses and say, I'm not going to get anywhere here, but I'm going to need to go on to the next person that maybe I can make a difference for. Because for me, in this case of Brittney Griner, I thankfully haven't run into anyone I personally know that has, felt the way that I have seen on some social media. But it's if I sincerely felt like I had somebody who came to me and said, hey, I don't quite understand. Why are we so upset? I would be happy to sit down and have that conversation. I just have not run into that person on social media. So then you're what's the point in wasting my breath if I'm just going to ultimately end up just being shut down by this person because they're not interested in listening.
Right. And then, I think that there is some frustration that comes along with that too, because it's these are things that we care about and things that we, honestly, I think everybody should care about other people, but but so it gets frustrating. And then, I feel like I always have this existential crisis of I want to open myself up to have this conversation by posting this, that, or the other thing to bring awareness. But I guess you could just ignore it. I just don't know what the line is sometimes for myself. And so that's why I feel it's difficult. Yes, I want to have these conversations and I want to raise awareness. I'm going to post whatever the hell I want to post. But then when, people come at you and are just almost want to attack you for feeling that way or caring about this, that, or the other thing, it gets kind of difficult. And so sometimes I just don't know for my own personal self, where I'm willing to go and on what platform I'm willing to go, at it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I appreciate Richard from The Athletic asking this question, because I think it fits into what you're saying and then to kind of what I was saying as well. As he asked of Dr. Gilbert, he said, one of the most frustrating things for me when I've read commentary, particularly on social media, is the idea that Griner deserves her fate. Russia is a massively bad actor on the world stage. This is not for argument. They have certainly trumped up political charges before, and that is not for dispute. So maybe Griner brought cannabis oil into the country, but maybe she also did not. I've seen many people taking what the Russians are saying is pro forma truth. He basically said, how do you see it? And Dr. Gilbert said, I am right there with you. Vladimir Putin is currently engaged in completely unjust, totally horrifying war in Ukraine. This is not an intentional actor this is not an international actor that we should be taking seriously. He has shown that he has a very high priority of creating division among the American domestic public. This is all something that he wants. He wants this kind of confusion. He wants this debate. The fact that the public has responded sometimes in the way that is also not surprising to me. In some of my research, I look at public opinion on hostage recovery efforts. One of the things that comes up time and time again is that when the American public believes that an individual hostage is responsible for putting themselves into danger, then those members of the public are unlikely to support the government's efforts to bring them home. So a lot of people look at Brittney Griner and they say, well, she was carrying drugs. The willingness to blame her is directly connected to the opposition to any efforts that the White House would make to bring her and Paul Whelan home. So how the public feels about the deservingness of an individual hostage is a really good predictor, of how the public responds to these cases. And so it's really interesting that she points out that, like, people have just seen, well, she is responsible because she had this. If she didn't want to, she shouldn't have had it. So therefore she's to blame. And I think, that's kind of a part of it, is like, this is what is wanted. They're wanting us to disagree on this and to not come to a conclusion together on this. And that's, I think, probably one of the more sad parts. And like, yeah.
I know that the people that listen to this podcast probably will go search out those articles that you mentioned and read for themselves.
The Athletic, Sports Illustrated. Just if you Google Brittney Griner right now, like we have talked about on this podcast before, there's more coverage than there ever has been. So that's great. So there's no, you're not at want for coverage. It's important to go read everything. But I have found that the Athletic in particular has done a very nice job keeping on top of this. Yeah.
I'm going to go share those because, one, I want to read them in full. But yeah, I understand that, like, divisionally, especially here in the United States, like, it can be hard when it comes to, honestly, Brittney Griner's situation is only political because one person made it political and they wanted it to be that way. And honestly, if you look at social media or even try to have this conversation sometimes with people, you can see that it's working. So, like, critical thinking and doing some research for yourselves is super important. Even if it's not to have a conversation, but just to keep yourself completely educated on the things that are actually going on around us.
And I won't read from this, but I would encourage you to also go Google this. It's actually, of all places, in Harper Bazaar by Jackie Powell. The article is titled "How the WNBA Could Have Saved Brittney Griner." The subhead is "Russia tends to offer United States women basketball players big money, but Putin doesn't play by the rules," which is incredibly true. We've talked about this on this podcast before, that the WNBA forces, not directly, but like by not paying their players enough, these women are being forced to have to go play overseas, and one of those places is Russia. And it's a dangerous thing. And so I appreciate Harper Bazaar taking this topic on and diving into it. I think when we've talked about this before, there's always people who, and it's, I'm expecting a comment or two of somebody who's like, they're gonna say exactly everything that we've just kind of spent the last 30 minutes trying to say, like, we need to have a conversation about. But I think, like, I don't even want to ask you to be like, if you are somebody who's critical of this conversation, I'm not even here to ask you to try to agree with us. I just want you to stop and think about the humanity aspect of it for a second. Like, taking all other things away, just having the humanity to say, like, this is a situation that is much bigger and deeper than maybe I even understand. This is somebody's wife. This is somebody's daughter. This is somebody's friend. This is somebody's teammate. And there are a lot of people concerned, but, like, it's not just about her. Like we said, it's also about Paul Whelan and his family and what they're thinking, and any future person who finds themselves in this exact scenario. Like, this is not just about, it is about Brittney, but it's also about much more than Brittney. And I think, I think that's kind of where we sometimes get lost, is we look at the one individual and go, well, that's it, but we don't see the bigger picture. It's like, I think of how many times, to bring his name back up, but how many times people got lost on the bigger picture of what Colin Kaepernick was talking about because they didn't like Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
And so they hyper focused on him without realizing that, like, maybe I don't like him, but maybe I can get my head wrapped around something about him, something that he stands for that, like, I do resonate with as well.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's the case, but I think sometimes you kind of have to, like, just look at the humanity piece of it. And if you can't get yourself there, then that is, unfortunately, like I said, probably a line in the sand where this conversation won't go any further, because like I said, I am asking that humanity aspect. And if you're like, I'm not going to see that, I'm not going to go there, well, then unfortunately our conversation can't get any further. We're kind of at an impasse at that point. And if that's the case, like, I wish you well.
Yeah. But it's not a conversation, and then there's nothing else to discuss. Like, that's just the way it is.
It's just the way it is. Yeah. It's been a bummer to kind of just watch things and kind of feel like I wish I could have, I don't know, like, I hate that, like, sometimes, like you said, I don't care what I tweet or share or whatever. It doesn't matter to me, but, like, it kind of makes me sad, because I think a lot about like, when people come into my mentions and they say the things that they did, like in response to my tweet about Brittney Griner, I'm like, you're probably getting muted or removed from my space. And your limit in your interaction with me is very limited. Brittney is certainly never going to see any of the things that you have to say, but there are people in your lives that are going to see the things that you have said. And they're now going to know how you feel about things or how you're going to react to things in a moment. And that's going to affect them. It may not affect me. It may not affect some, I think a little bit of what the internet has done to people is they feel like I can say things to people without really any repercussion. But what they don't realize is your repercussion may not actually come from the person that you are responding to. It's going to come from the people that that have witnessed how you've reacted in that way. And now you get to answer for that. And you know what? The part is you may never even know, because they may just go chalk that up as they're never going to understand me. And now you've lost that relationship without ever having any idea.
Yep. I think I shared on this podcast probably around this time last year. I didn't even really, let this person know why, but I didn't think it was my duty to do that. This is how people, have grown apart from you in your life, or you've just separated paths. It's how you lose friendships. Sometimes it's how you distance yourself from relatives. And honestly, at the end of the day, if you wonder why, and it's happening to you frequently, maybe it's time to sit back and have a little bit of self-inflection and a chat with yourself.
I mean, I look forward to a day where, like, and I just, at the same time, I'm like, we'll probably never quite be there ever. Like, I'm not even sure that we ever have been there. Like, here's the part, kind of bring this all full circle. I was just about to make that comment where you're like, oh, I just hope that we can get back to a day. There are people like Black women who will tell you we've never been at a place where we've had some of these conversations, because people aren't listening to us anyway when we talk about these things. And so I think there's a point in privilege of me saying, like, oh, to get back to the days where, like, we didn't have to think about these things is like a point of privilege, where I'm like talking about a point where it was very easy and comfortable for me, because we weren't having to have these tougher conversations. And that's just not reality. So
yeah, exactly.
So I guess, like, as we get ready to head into another, new seasons of sports, like, I know for many of you, high school sports seasons have kicked off. I know collegiately, a lot of seasons have started to kick off. And as, like, we start to get into this year, things, stories are going to continue. And I encourage you not to lose sight of stories as we get busy. Obviously you need to protect your own mental health and do the things that you love and matter to you, but, like, try to have conversations with people when you're able, knowing that, like, some people are just not going to listen. But, like Sausha and Sadie from Meathead Test Kitchen brought up, men talking to men, but also women talk to other women, listen to each other, challenge each other, try to seek out that humanity. It's not going to work for everyone, but you never know who you might touch by just taking a chance to reach out.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Oh, Sausha, I'm tired. I just need to know, like, and
I'm exhausted.
I don't know what to tell you about golf and Pinnacle Bank Championship with how hot it's going to be, but I will give you one piece of advice. And this is advice for everyone on this call. I am in half marathon training. I went running this past Sunday. It was very hot. It was very humid. I did not drink enough water, but even enough water probably wouldn't have been enough. I probably should have gotten some Gatorade or some Powerade or something with some electrolytes. Pedialyte, doesn't matter. I had the worst migraine of my life by that evening. It was entirely dehydration based. My Whoop was screaming at me that night because it could tell how, like, bad it was. So anybody, if you're spending any time outside, please hydrate.
Yeah. I went golfing on Sunday actually, and then the Sunday prior though, I did go out and run, but it was like literally at the hottest point of the day. It was at 5 p.m. and that was a mistake, and I knew it immediately. So make sure that you take care of yourselves and that you hydrate and you have the snacks. And if you have the opportunity and are running and are training for half marathon, like Erin and I both are, try if you can to do it in the morning, or at least not in the dead heat of the day.
I will say, the time that we're recording this, I was debating if I wanted to go out and run right now. I either will go to my treadmill or I will wait till a little bit later because I have learned my lesson.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I went this morning.
Good for
early.
You. I wish I would have, but I was on my way to Lincoln.
Yeah.
For 5. All right. Anyway. Well, as always, we appreciate you listening. Feel free to send us an email at mindyourownpodcast at hillvarsity.com. Here's the deal. I'll figure out what's going on with that inbox. So if you've emailed us, we'll eventually respond to it. But, is Mercury in retrograde? Sometimes like communication gets kind of wonky when it is. I saw something on TikTok about a portal opening yesterday. So who knows? Anyway.
Let me know where that is.
Keep me posted. But yeah, email us, mindyourownpodcast at hillvarsity.com. You can also tweet at us at Erin Sorensen, at Sausha72. We will be back next week. We will be, we will figure it out at some point. Sausha and I will be recording while I am in Dublin. It'll be the time difference episode of a lifetime. So just thank you for tuning in.
Yes.
We'll be back next week with even more. Thank you to Union Bank and Trust for making it possible to go to Ireland for Hill Varsity. And yeah. Everyone, go get some rest and drink some water.
Please do. Bye.
A Hurrdat Media Production.